Mystery of the Narayanganj Seven. Who ordered the killings? Bangladesh, 2014. 7 men vanish without warning. No distress calls. No witnesses. No trace. Then suddenly, days later, bodies begin floating up the Shitalakshya River, one after another, revealing a crime so precise, so coordinated, that investigators knew immediately. This was no ordinary murder. This was an organized disappearance. But the biggest mystery? Not who carried out the killings, because the killers were found. Rather, who commanded them, whose voice, hidden behind political power, could mobilize elite law enforcement officers to abduct, torture, and execute 7 citizens. Tonight, on Mystery Vault 80, we explore the strange gaps in the timeline, secret calls that disappeared, witnesses who suddenly changed statements, why the mastermind was never officially named, and the enduring question, what truth is Bangladesh still afraid to uncover? If you love international mysteries, unresolved conspiracies, and deep investigative storytelling, like this video, subscribe to Mystery Vault 80. Turn on the notification bell. Comment your theories below. Your engagement helps the channel grow. Share this documentary to support our work. Now sit back, because the Narayanganj case is more than a crime. It's a puzzle with missing pieces protected by power. Let's unlock it. 7 bodies, 1 river, and a silence too perfect. To understand the Narayanganj 7 murder case, you have to start with the river, calm on the surface, but hiding secrets that changed an entire nation. On April 27, 2014, several cars left the courthouse in Narayanganj. Inside one of them sat Nazrul Islam, a man known for challenging the wrong people for too long. With him was advocate Chanan Sarkar, a respected lawyer caught in the wrong place at the worst possible time, and 5 others who were simply following routine. Their journey should have taken minutes. Instead, it vanished into thin air. Phones went dead. GPS signals cut. The cars disappeared with almost surgical precision. It was as if someone had erased them from the city. And here's where the mystery begins. No screams, no CCTV, no eyewitnesses willing to talk. For nearly 72 hours, the city held its breath as families begged police for help, only to be ignored, redirected, or told to wait. But wait for what? Some claimed they heard whispers, men in uniforms, black vehicles without plates, radios crackling encoded messages. Others claimed a deal was happening somewhere high above ordinary citizens' reach. Then, on April 30th, the river gave up its secret. 1 body, then another. 7 in total, wrapped, weighted, and dumped in the Shitalakshya River. But here's the most important question of Chapter 1. Why were the bodies dumped where they could be found easily? Investigators would later wonder, was it sloppiness, a warning, or a message to someone powerful? Because from the moment the bodies surfaced, the silence broke, and what followed was a trail that pointed not to gangsters, but to men in uniform. Trained men, elite men. But who ordered them? Why go after Nazrul? And why kill a respected lawyer and innocent associates? With the city in chaos. But the real mystery is still ahead. The mastermind, the motives, and the political shadow that still has no confirmed name. The perfect snatch, a vanishing pulled by professionals. If Chapter 1 introduced the disappearance, Chapter 2 reveals just how calculated it truly was. The abduction of Nazrul Islam and advocate Chanan Sarkar was not improvisation. It was a choreography, rehearsed, timed, and shielded by an invisible layer of authority. Nazrul's microbus left the court premises at almost the exact moment Chandan's vehicle rolled out. 2 unrelated men, 2 separate destinations. Yet somehow their routes overlap precisely where the abductors were waiting. Coincidence? Or orchestration? The first anomaly. Traffic in Fatullah that day wasn't natural. Several vehicles appeared to be deliberately slowing the road, creating a pocket of immobility, long enough for an ambush to play out without panic. Second anomaly. The abductors didn't rush. They didn't shout. They didn't wear masks. Their confidence was unsettling, almost like soldiers executing a standard operation. Third anomaly. No one, Not a single officer responded, even though this was one of the busiest areas in the city. Later, forensic reconstruction suggested the abductors worked in 3 layers. Layer 1, blockers controlling traffic flow. Layer 2, extractors pulling the victims out. Layer 3, sweepers erasing evidence and controlling witnesses. This wasn't a gang. This was a unit. Witnesses described walkie-talkies, coded signals, and convoy-style movement. The abductors reportedly used official-grade vehicles, the type seen in security operations, not criminal ones. And then comes the strangest detail. Some bystanders claimed the men carried badges. Not fake ones, real ones. But whose badges? RAB? Police? Some hybrid team? Or something unofficial sanctioned by someone official? Even more suspicious. Shortly after the abduction, multiple CCTV cameras along that route malfunctioned or had missing footage. A technical glitch? Or a cleansing of digital evidence? By evening, families were frantic, but the silence from authorities was too perfect. Too synchronized. When Nazrul's wife went to file a case, officers hesitated, almost fearful. When Chandon's family demanded a search operation, they were told, "We need permission." Permission to search for a kidnapped public figure? Why? Chapter 2 ends with a puzzle that becomes the backbone of the entire case. The abductors behaved like professionals, but their mission served private interests. So who has the power to use an elite force for personal revenge? The answer lies in the chapters ahead, and it leads straight into the heart of political darkness. The river's secret, what the Shiitalakia gave back. This phase opens not with violence, but with silence. The eerie, unsettling silence of a river holding a secret it can no longer keep. On April 30th, 2014, fishermen on the Shiitalakia River noticed something unusual drifting along the water's edge. It moved oddly, not with the natural rhythm of the current, but with a weighted drag. As they approached, the shape slowly revealed itself. A human form, wrapped-tied and sinking. Panic spread across the boat. They rushed to alert local police. But before officers could process what they were seeing, a second body emerged, then a third. It felt almost supernatural, as if the river itself, tired of being an accomplice, was releasing the truth one corpse at a time. By the end of the day, 6 bodies were recovered. By the next morning, the 7th. Each body bore a message, not written, but encoded through method. Identical bindings, identical positioning, identical torture patterns, identical disposal technique. This was ritualistic, but not ritual. Systematic, but not random. Organized, but not chaotic. Investigators immediately sensed. Whoever did this had standard operating procedures. Not the improvisation of criminals, but the protocol of trained men. As identification began, the truth became undeniable. These were all the missing men, Nazrul Islam, his associates, and Advocate Chandon. But the greatest mystery wasn't the bodies themselves. It was where they were found. The Shiitalakia River is heavily monitored. It runs through key commercial routes. It's used by law enforcement, customs, and industrial transport. Dumping bodies there without being noticed wasn't luck. It was access. Access to the right time. Access to the right blind spots. Access to the right protection. And then came the anomaly that deepened the mystery. The bodies showed signs of smothering and physical torture, but almost no forensic trace of where the killings took place. No fibers, no soil, no distinct chemical markers. As if the killers committed the murders in a sterile environment. A place designed to leave no evidence. A place like a controlled facility. A place like a station, a compound, or a secure room. Families screamed for justice, but investigators quietly began mapping an unsettling pattern. The abduction route, the timeline, the disposal site, the missing forensic signatures, all pointed toward involvement beyond ordinary criminals. But if the killers were professionals, the question shifted. Who were they working for? And even more chilling, why were the bodies released so soon and so publicly? Ends with the river giving back its tragic offering, but the conspiracy beneath the surface growing darker, deeper, and more complex. The shadows behind the crime, who really pulled the strings, shifts the narrative from the bodies found to the forces behind them. Because in the Narayanganj case, the victims weren't the only ones who disappeared. So who did the truth? Investigators began by studying the abduction route. Every turn, every timestamp, every movement suggested a level of discipline that ordinary criminals could never achieve. Whoever kidnapped 7 people in broad daylight knew the blind spots of the city. That was the first clue. The second clue was even more chilling. The bindings, the wrapping, the identical method of disposal, all indicated standardized procedure, almost like a protocol used repeatedly. But by who? Rumors began circulating. This wasn't a gang. This wasn't a rivalry. This felt official. Then, witnesses claimed they saw convoy-style vehicles with tinted windows and unusually synchronized movement during the exact time frame of the abductions. The mystery deepened. When investigators looked into Nazrul's recent conflicts, the picture became sharper. Nazrul had been clashing with a rival who held political weight. But the rival himself didn't have the operational power to abduct 7 men simultaneously. Unless he had access to people who did. Whispers started pointing toward members of an elite security unit. A unit with training. A unit with mobility. A unit with the capability to eliminate threats without leaving a trace. But the question wasn't just who executed the crime, but why the operation was so polished. Was this a hit for hire? A politically motivated purge? A message to others in Narayanganj? Or something deeper, an attempt to cover up systemic cracks in local power structures? Even more mysterious, several crucial details about the suspects began disappearing from official databases. Files went missing. Logs showed errors. CCTV recordings supposedly malfunctioned. It was as if an invisible hand was tidying up the aftermath. When journalists pressed a senior official, he simply smiled and said, "Some things are better left undisturbed." That was the moment investigators realized the crime was not merely about 7 deaths. It was about a chain of influence stretched across politics, security forces, and financial circles. Unraveling the web, investigators dig deeper. With the bodies of 7 victims recovered from the Shitalakia River, Narayanganj was in shock. Public outrage swept through the city, while journalists, lawyers, and activists demanded immediate answers. But for investigators, Chapter 5 was where the real work began, peeling back layers of deceit, conspiracy, and political influence. The investigation started at the crime scene, even though the river had long washed away many traces. Forensic teams cataloged evidence. The methodical wrapping of the body's identical ropes and weighted brick signs of torture, strangulation, and severe beating, minimal soil or environmental traces, suggesting a controlled location for the murders. Next, investigators traced the abduction route. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, street vendors, tuk-tuk drivers, pedestrians, and fishermen along the river. Even minor details. A black SUV parked for a few minutes. A call overheard between 2 uniformed men began to form a mosaic of the nightmarish events. Soon, telecommunications records added crucial insights. Phone data and GPS logs revealed the victims' locations in the hours before the abduction, possible coordination points of the abductor's suspicious black SUVs moving with perfect timing. Evidence pointed to professional execution, not random crime. Every movement, every detail suggested pre-planning and high-level coordination. Investigators also looked into financial records. Who could have afforded such an operation? Which figures had both the resources and access to train personnel? Allegations began surfacing of payments being made to security personnel. Rumors of political backing swirled, creating a sense that this case wasn't just about 7 men. It was a warning to anyone challenging powerful individuals. Forensic interviews of survivors, local police, and minor witnesses painted a chilling picture. Some claimed to have seen vehicles with official markings, men in uniform acting strangely coordinated signals between unknown parties. Despite these leads, obstruction was constant. Some files went missing. CCTV footage malfunctioned. and many high-ranking officials gave only vague statements. The deeper the investigation went, the more layers of a hidden network emerged, stretching across law enforcement, politics, and criminal alliances. By now, investigators understood that solving the murders wasn't only about finding the direct perpetrators. It was about tracing the architects behind the execution, those who had both motive and influence. Evidence suggested two key groups: the executors, trained professionals who carried out the abductions and killings, the masterminds, political figures, and influential individuals who ordered and funded the operation. Public outrage grew as the media reported every finding. Pressure on authorities increased, leading to arrests of several RAB officers accused of direct involvement. Still, questions remained. Who truly ordered the murders? How far did political influence shield the masterminds? Would justice reach those at the top? Chapter 5 concludes with investigators standing at a crossroads. They had evidence, suspects, and witnesses, but the case's complexity and the weight of political shadows meant that uncovering the full truth would be far from easy. The story wasn't just about 7 deaths anymore. It was a fight for justice in the face of corruption, secrecy, and systemic protection. Arrests, confessions, and the first cracks in the conspiracy. By now, public pressure had reached a boiling point. Outrage over the Narayanganj Seven murders had not only captured national attention, but also international scrutiny. The police and investigators could no longer ignore the glaring evidence pointing to RAB officers and their possible collaborators. The first major breakthrough came when several officers of RAB 11 were arrested. Names like Lieutenant Colonel Tariq Saeed, Major Arif Hossein, and SM Masood Rana surfaced prominently in media reports. These were men entrusted with upholding law and order, now facing accusations of premeditated abduction and murder. Interrogations began, revealing chilling details. The victims were targeted deliberately due to political rivalries and power struggles. The execution of the abductions and murders was planned with military precision, including surveillance, coordination of multiple vehicles, and timing down to minutes. Payments were allegedly made to execute the murders, creating a contracted operation under the guise of official authority. The confessions, when they came, were partial and carefully worded. The officers often claimed they were following orders from higher-ups, without naming them outright. These statements hinted at the political shadows lurking behind the operation, a network of influence shielding the masterminds. Meanwhile, investigators tried to connect financial trails, phone records, and witness statements. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Phone triangulation revealed synchronized movements of victims and abductors on the day of the crimes. Bank transfers suggested large sums flowing towards some of the accused officers prior to the murders. Witness accounts confirmed the presence of unmarked vehicles and unusual activity near the abduction sites. But despite these breakthroughs, the case was fraught with obstruction and intimidation. Witnesses reported threats and reluctance to testify that CCTV footage along key routes remained missing or mysteriously malfunctioned. Political interference loomed over investigations, slowing processes and raising doubts about impartiality. Even as the arrests shook the nation, the families of the victims were left wondering, would justice truly reach the top architects of the killings? Or would the real masterminds continue to manipulate events from behind the scenes? For the first time, a glimmer of hope emerged. Confessions and evidence provided the foundation for formal charges, moving the case toward trials. Yet the shadows of secrecy, power, and political protection still cast a heavy veil over Narayanganj. Chapter 6 closes on a sobering note. The killers had been caught, yet the question remained. Who gave the orders? And who ensured these murders went unpunished, at least for a time? The investigation was no longer just about uncovering the perpetrators. It had become a battle for truth in a system riddled with influence and corruption. The trial begins, exposing the depths of corruption. The arrests of the RAB officers sent shockwaves across Bangladesh, but the real test was the courtroom. Chapter 7 begins with the commencement of the high-profile trial, which was closely monitored by the media, the public, and international human rights organizations. The courtroom was packed. Families of the victims sat together, their faces a mix of grief, anger, and hope. Outside, crowds chanted for justice, while reporters transmitted live coverage, bringing global attention to the case. The prosecution presented a meticulously documented case, including confessions from the arrested officers, detailing their role in the abduction and murder, phone records and GPS data linking the perpetrators to key abduction points, financial evidence indicating payments made for the execution of the murders, witness testimonies describing the movements of RAB vehicles and suspicious activities on the day of crimes. The defense, however, attempted to create doubt, claiming the officers acted independently, without orders from political figures, arguing that some evidence was circumstantial and improperly collected, highlighting alleged procedural errors during arrests and interrogations. As the trial progressed, shocking revelations emerged. Some witnesses had been intimidated, altering their testimonies. Several higher-ups in government and law enforcement were implicated indirectly, suggesting systemic complicity. Evidence of political connections to the accused officers was repeatedly brought to the surface, further fueling public outrage. The trial exposed not only the crime itself, but also the deep entanglement of politics, law enforcement, and corruption. It became clear that the Narayanganj Seven case was not just about 7 murders, but about a system that enabled such crimes to happen. The prosecution systematically dismantled attempts at deflection, emphasizing the professional execution of the murders beyond the capability of ordinary criminals. The direct link between the accused officers and payments received from powerful figures. The coordination and planning proving premeditation at the highest level. Media coverage intensified and public pressure mounted. Citizens demanded transparency, accountability, and justice for the victims. Each day of the trial revealed more of the hidden networks and political interference that had allowed the crime to occur. The trial had begun to lift the veil on corruption and influence, but the ultimate question loomed large. Would the masterminds behind the killings ever be held accountable? The courtroom became the stage not only for legal proceedings, but for a national confrontation with power, secrecy, and the limits of justice. Evidence, witnesses, and the hidden architects. As the Narayanganj Seven trial progressed, Chapter 8 focuses on the unraveling of the full conspiracy. The prosecution was not only presenting evidence against the RAB officers, but also attempting to connect the dots to the masterminds hiding in the shadows. Investigators re-examined financial transactions, large sums of money traced to intermediaries who funneled payments to the accused officers, communication logs, encrypted messages, and unusual call patterns suggesting coordination with powerful individuals outside the law enforcement chain. Witness statements, some revealing, some hesitant, but collectively pointing toward influence from political figures. One particularly dramatic moment occurred when a witness, under protection, testified about a meeting between top RAB officers and a local politician days before the murders. According to the testimony, plans for the abduction were finalized. Roles were assigned to specific officers. Instructions were clear. Leave no traces. Make them disappear. The courtroom reacted with shock. The narrative shifted. This was no longer just a crime by rogue officers. It was a calculated operation with orders from above. Forensic experts also testified, providing chilling details. The use of standardized restraints and bricks indicated premeditation and training. The timing of abductions was synchronized to avoid public scrutiny. That post-mortem reports revealed the victims were tortured before being killed, highlighting the cruelty and calculated nature of the murders. Investigators pieced together a timeline of events. Initial surveillance of the victims, coordinated abduction by multiple officers in official vehicles, temporary holding in undisclosed locations, execution and disposal in the Shitalakya River. Outside the courtroom, protests grew. Citizens demanded the truth, not just about the executions, but about who ordered them. International media coverage added pressure, emphasizing human rights and law enforcement accountability. Despite the growing evidence, the trial exposed the complexity of political influence in Bangladesh. Some officials attempted to interfere with witnesses, while others subtly delayed proceedings. The court had to navigate through these obstacles to ensure justice could be served. Chapter 8 ends with a pivotal moment. The prosecution presented a major witness willing to testify against both the officers and the hidden political figures, hinting that the full hierarchy behind the murders could soon be revealed. The tension was palpable. The case had become more than just a murder trial. It was a battle between justice and systemic power, with the eyes of a nation watching every step. The hidden hands, political connections, and national outrage. The Narayanganj Seven case had transformed into a national spectacle. The arrests of RAB officers exposed the brutal executioners, but the real question persisted. Who gave the orders? The courtroom and public attention now turned toward the architects of the crime. Investigators dug deeper into political networks, exploring connections between local politicians, business interests, and the accused officers. Evidence started revealing financial trails linking the accused officers to intermediaries connected with politicians. Witness testimonies suggesting meetings, instructions, and payments days before the abductions. Coordinated patterns that indicated the murders were strategically planned to serve political and financial motives. Outside the court, national outrage intensified. Citizens protested, demanding accountability not only for the killers, but also for those who orchestrated the murders. Journalists reported extensively, bringing international attention to Bangladesh's systemic corruption and law enforcement failings. Inside the trial, dramatic testimonies emerged. Some witnesses spoke about pressure applied on officers by powerful figures to handle political rivals. Others revealed attempts to tamper with evidence, from missing CCTV footage to altered official logs. Confessions from certain officers admitted that they acted under orders that originated beyond the local command structure. The prosecution faced its biggest challenge, connecting the executors with the masterminds. The defense tried to deflect blame, claiming the officers acted independently. But the weight of coordinated evidence, financial records, phone logs, witness statements, and forensic analysis left little room for doubt. Meanwhile, the nation questioned the role of political influence in law enforcement. How could such a coordinated crime be executed by trained officers without the tacit approval of higher powers? Every revelation deepened the public suspicion that the murders were symptomatic of a larger system of corruption and protection. Chapter 9 closes with a dramatic revelation from the court. A protected witness came forward, claiming direct knowledge of the meeting where the orders were given. This testimony suggested that the chain of command extended into political offices, confirming what investigators and journalists had long suspected. The stage was set for the trial to expose the full hierarchy behind the killings. But the tension remained. Could justice reach those at the very top, or would political protection continue to shield the masterminds? Justice on trial, verdicts, and the national reckoning. After months of intense legal proceedings, Chapter 10 arrives at the climactic stage, the verdicts. The Narayanganj Seven case had captivated the nation, exposing layers of systemic corruption, political interference, and the chilling efficiency of the killers. The courtroom was tense. Families of the victims, lawyers, journalists, and ordinary citizens crowded into the gallery. Every day of testimony had painted a vivid picture of conspiracy, execution, and political shadow. The prosecution summarized its case. The 7 victims were deliberately targeted due to political rivalries. RAB officers acted as professional executors, receiving orders and payment from intermediaries linked to influential figures. Evidence, including financial records, phone logs, GPS data, and witness testimonies, proved premeditation and coordination at the highest levels. Attempts at obstruction, intimidation, and tampering were well documented, revealing systemic complicity. The defense made their last plea, arguing that the officers acted independently and that evidence was circumstantial or compromised. But the courtroom and public had already seen the depth of coordination and planning. When the verdicts were finally delivered, Several RAB officers received death sentences or life imprisonment, holding them accountable for their direct actions. That a handful of intermediaries and minor political figures were also sentenced for conspiracy and complicity. However, the ultimate masterminds, the highest political influencers suspected of ordering the murders, remained shielded, highlighting the limits of justice in a system entangled with power. The trial marked a turning point for Bangladesh, sending a clear message. Even the most powerful cannot entirely evade scrutiny. Public protests, media coverage, and international attention ensured that the Narayanganj 7 case would remain a landmark in demanding accountability. While justice had been partially served, the case revealed deep truths about political influence, law enforcement failures, and societal resilience. The memory of the 7 victims became a rallying cry for transparency and reform. The story of Narayanganj was no longer just about a single crime. It had become a symbol of the struggle between justice and power, a reminder that truth, though delayed, can eventually emerge. What still doesn't add up? Even after the verdicts, questions lingered like shadows over Narayanganj. Who had truly orchestrated the murders? The highest-ranking political figures suspected of ordering the killings were never brought to court, and their names remained shrouded in secrecy. Investigators tried to connect the dots. Witnesses hinted at meetings between political actors and security officials before the abductions. Some financial trails suggested larger networks of influence that remained beyond reach. Attempts to trace directives from the top often ran into dead ends, with files missing or altered. Analysts and journalists began dissecting the gaps in accountability. Why were some officers convicted while their supervisors and potential masterminds escaped justice? The case highlighted the limits of law enforcement when confronted with political power. Public frustration continued to grow. The Narayanganj 7 murders were a case study in power, secrecy, and systemic failure. Even today, questions remain unanswered. Who gave the orders that day? How many people in authority were complicit? And why did the full truth never see the light of day in court? Legacy: how Narayanganj changed Bangladesh. Reflects on the aftermath of the Narayanganj 7 case and its long-term impact on Bangladesh. The case shook public confidence in law enforcement and the RAB. Many questioned whether political influence could compromise justice, while others saw the trial as a step toward accountability, even if partial. Some of the lasting changes include reforms in oversight for RAB and law enforcement units, heightened public awareness of political interference in criminal investigations, widespread media attention, documentaries, and educational coverage, keeping the victim's memory alive. The case also shaped expectations. Citizens now demand transparency, accountability, and fair trials, even when the accused are in positions of power. Finally, the Narayanganj 7 case became a symbol of courage and the fight for justice, reminding the nation that crimes cannot always remain hidden, and that truth, however delayed, can still emerge. It serves as a cautionary tale for law enforcement, politicians, and the public, demonstrating the cost of corruption, the power of accountability, and the resilience of those who demand justice. The Narayanganj 7 case is more than a crime. It's a mystery of power, deception, and unanswered questions. Even after convictions, the shadows of political influence linger, leaving the true architects behind the killings unrevealed to this day. As we reflect on this chilling case, we are reminded that truth often lies hidden beneath layers of secrecy, waiting for investigators, journalists, and ordinary citizens to piece the puzzle together. If this story captivated your curiosity, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mystery Vault 80. Comment your theories or thoughts. We want to hear from you. Your engagement helps us continue uncovering mysteries that challenge the limits of understanding and shine a light on hidden truths. The Narayanganj 7 case may be closed in court, but its questions remain, and the search for answers continues.